Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Motogp Xtra podcast. I'm Rhys, and joining me as always to discuss the events of the weekend is my co-host Dill. Now, we had a pretty interesting, slightly strange, different scheduled weekend, and of course we'll come back to that later with the MotoGP race being on a Saturday first. But of course, we're going to do our normal order, Moto3, Moto2, so MotoGP will still be at the end even though the main race was first. So without any further ado, may as well head straight into Moto3, and I'll pass it over to you, Dill. There's quite a few crashes on the starting lap, wasn't there? It was chaos before the race even started.
Yeah, and even including some of the main championship challengers. It was just a really weird Moto3 race. We had weird leaders. We had championship leaders going forward, going backwards, standing riders doing well. The Moto3 race was a proper 1-2-5 race from 2006 that just had everything, really. It was just a crazy race, and I think on the way to the grid, I'm going to say, was there 3? I can remember, maybe 4. And we had, actually, 4. There was Vicente Perez. There was Moreira.
He crashed, though, I don't think. I think he just went off.
Oh, did he go? Okay, 3.5.
I think he just went to the gravel. Yeah.
So Vicente Perez, Holgado, Moreira, Bertelli. He go off, is that, I think?
I think he might have, I don't know if he crashed or went off. He was in the race, so he probably just ran off. Although so was Holgado, so yeah.
Yeah, so
maybe.
And Holgado's crash was big, like. His was a big one. But yeah,
it was get back on, so
I think over the last 6-7 podcasts we did, we've actually talked about this quite a lot. We're like, it's a rare occurrence, it doesn't happen, it's one of those freak accidents, and 5 people nearly went off track today and happened again in Moto 2, so it's a
bit different in the rain, to be fair.
100%, completely, exactly. Yeah, when it's windy, cold, raining like that, and they did get a morning warm-up. We're very vocal, a lot of us, about the fact that junior and middleweight classes don't have a Sunday morning warm-up, but they weren't given it today due to the lack of wet running. And
shows they still have time for it.
It's
they can still fit it in the schedule fine. I mean, I know they were obviously probably planning it a bit later because GP was only going to be a sprint, but still.
Again, like I said, I think we've agreed before, they could easily fit 2 10-minute sessions in somewhere in the morning if needs be. But that track, or the warm-up in the morning for the Moto3 boys, was damp. And when they got to the race, it was a completely different story of what the track condition was. So I wasn't massively surprised with so many people went off because of how cold it is. So you can't... the issue was that you're leaving pit lane, you're trundling down to turn 1, which is a really fast... So Dunes is really fast, kind of 4th gear on a GP bike probably. And you are rolling through there, you're rolling through turn 2, and you're not really getting any sort of temperature into the tyre or a heavy load into turn till you get to Miller Corner when you're actually doing a bit of braking. A lot of them you'll flow through in the opening kind of sector on the outlap, and you're just not putting anything load through your tyres. You're right by the coast, so severe winds. The place was ice cold today, and then you've wets. And it was just a recipe for disaster. I'm kind of glad that, touchwood, I don't know of anyone who got injured today, as there was so many crashes.
Dixon, I believe, has got to have some extra checks on his shoulder, but as far as I can tell, I haven't seen anybody else.
Fair. When he did crash, again, we'll touch on him later probably in that segment, but when he crashed, he probably did look a bit... I thought he was a bit kind of upset more than anything, but again, maybe injury, upset, a bit of everything got rolled into one. But yeah, in Moto 3, it was just, there was so many crashes and so many people going off, and again, they are... we'll say the rookies and the younger riders, but they're still the best in their field at the moment. So it was crazy. So see so many go off.
Yeah, it is unusual, and even in wet races, generally speaking, the grip is pretty good these days. The wet tires are very, very good, and teams are usually pretty good at getting the bike set up, and they can sort of make it around. I mean, probably something's worth mentioning that at the beginning of the race, they were 20 seconds a lap off of dry time, which is ridiculously slow. You're usually within 10. Most circuits, sometimes 5 seconds if it's a really grippy circuit. So, yeah, it really showed how treacherous the conditions were, and you make a good point that, it was mainly down to the wind and the temperature. I think if there was no crosswind and it was a bit warmer, the amount of rain may have been a bit of a problem in the Moto3 race, actually, because there was a lot of spray on the start straight, but I think after that, probably was okay, probably wasn't too bad, but yeah, it was just a combination of all the factors. Obviously, we'll come on to that one later, but yeah, of course, there was plenty of crashes on the starting lap, and you alluded to the amount that happened in the race, and unfortunately one of them was Adrian Fernandez. But let's focus on the positives. Obviously, standing in for Tatsuki Suzuki for the last few rounds of the season, signed by Leopard for next season. Basically, there was a bit of a to-do going on behind the scenes. They're like, oh, Suzuki, you take a couple of races off and we'll bring Fernandez in to let him learn some of these tracks. And Suzuki basically got a new ride and for next year and was like, I'm not coming back at all. So we got Adrian in for the last few races, of course, raced in Moto3 previously, brother of Raul, and not really had much, has he really, results-wise? I think his best result was about, was it 5th place before today or 4th place? And he was basically from the off, just pulled away and looked, basically didn't put a foot wrong aside from the one mistake he did make where he ran a little bit wide, such a little crash, and did a great job still finish at the top 5.
Yeah, he's someone that I always felt that was because his brother got seats that he probably didn't deserve. I felt when he got
contractually, I think that was true. I think he genuinely did get a seat. I think it was in Raul's contract so that he would get that 3 seat, I think, at the time.
Yeah,
it's to do with when he went up to MotoGP and stuff. It
was like a sweetener for the brother, but he just didn't perform at all that year. I just felt like the whole pressure of him being, all right, my brother's got me the seat. It's not like they came wanting me, and I think maybe that got to his head a bit. And again, very young still, is Andrew Fernandez. So he was one of those riders you feel like that maybe the opportunity came too early, or maybe he just wasn't as good as his brother, and everyone putting the pressure on him. And he kind of did a couple of seasons, then went missing. He lost his ride, kind of deservedly, really, in the end because of the results. But he's done a couple of stand-in rides this year for Suzuki, and not been outrageously amazing. But for whatever reason, this weekend, the rain today, he was just really good. He was one of those riders that look really small on the bike, and usually in the wet, it's the opposite. That you want to be kind of big, have long levers, weigh an extra bit. Petrucci, Colin Edwards were 2 riders you kind of think of, 2 taller riders that weighed a bit more, that usually in the rain could just make a small difference because of the weight. But Fernandez being smaller, he just seemed really flowing, wasn't hard on the brakes, high corner speed, which is quite risky in the wet, but in fairness to him, he was pretty much faultless up into that crash. And again, he crashed into one corner where it kind of felt like a bit of potluck where he made it through. There was a couple times on through there and had a little twitch. So just tips the bike in. Doesn't look like he's done anything. It's not one of those corners where you can see he's backing it in, and it's going one way, and then he eventually loses it. It was just one of those wet crashes where 1 minute you're on, the next minute you're off. And I felt sorry for him because he probably deserved to win that race just because he was so consistent and his pace was so strong. Got to the front past Sasaki, and when he pulled away, I really thought, oh, he's on for his first podium and first win definitely, but wasn't to be in the end. But you are right, 100% fantastic from to remount and to get back and score solid points and take a P5. He can at least hold his head high after that. But there's one thing I want to point out when I watched it live. On the live feed, you see a Leopard bike crash. It cuts to the crew in the camp, and they're kind of like confused. And then they all see it's Andrew Fernandez, and I'm not lying. A lot of the team goes, "Phew!" A lot of them were just happy it wasn't Messiah, and I just felt like that. You should probably hide your emotions a bit better than that, because they all kind of like froze, and you could just see in their eyes they were tense because there was a Leopard bike in the gravel. And then when they saw it was Adrian Fernandez, they all kind of looked at each other like, "Geez, my heart! I thought that was Messiah." It was a little bit funny for me. So yeah. Maybe not the best management there from the Leopard boys, but sure, look, you can't really blame him with the rider in the championship standings where he is, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose Messiah, like if Messiah crashes, that's potentially more championship gone, whereas, Fernandez crashing, as long as he's okay, it's just, sort of throwing it at the wall because he's not in the championship, just throwing it for a win. And that probably actually benefited him today, to be fair, that he was probably able to go for it. And I think you'd probably make a good point that the few standing rides he's done, to be honest, he's been pretty better than Suzuki. Obviously, Suzuki won back in Argentina, and it looked like it was going to be a similar story here. So whoever's on that side of the garage obviously knows how to set up a bike for the rain. But it was a shame for him, but I think he can still take a lot of positives out of that one. And to be fair, probably kind of shown that he does deserve another chance in the category, because I think he's sort of honed his craft in some of the CV championship again. And perhaps he's built up a bit more confidence, which will be nice for him. So one rider that you don't typically see at the front, onto another one, Joel Kelso, the Australian at the Australian Grand Prix. What a weekend it's been for him. Obviously the race was wet. You can sit and say it was a weird result because of that, but he's looked pretty quick all weekend, even from FP1. He was up there, been much more competitive than he has been pretty much any other time. He's had a couple of good weekends over the season where he's qualified well and dropped back in the race, but looked like this weekend he had the pace to be in that front group, whether it was dry or wet, and brought him his first podium, got a job as well. Obviously, he didn't have a ride going into next season until literally like yesterday night, I think, sort of like before the race. So, yeah, it was pretty much the best weekend he could have hoped for. Podium at his home race, first ever podium, and secured his career for next season. Great weekend for Joe Kelso, and thoroughly deserved, and not, a nice guy for it to happen to as well.
Yeah, I just look with Kelso's season. I just look back to that instant he had after the flag coming across the line in Portimao. He showed good speed in Portimao and at the start of the season. I thought maybe one of those riders who had made a step in the off season and got injured literally right after the first race had ended. And to be honest, he showed glimpses throughout the season since, but he just never was the same rider I felt that he was in Portimao. And then of course you bring an Aussie to the Aussie GP, and the extra 5% comes out, and to be fair, he looked strong all weekend. And again, I'm happy that we have learned now that he's gotten himself a seat for 2024. But he was really good today. Now, he had, with about 3 or 4 laps ago, a couple of moments, and in fairness, was very sensible. Just knocked it back to 95%, brought it home, got his podium, and I'd say that was a sweet one today from, because first podium ride for next year settled yesterday evening. The pressure probably was off him, so he was able to ride today with a bit more freedom. And there was one point I was thinking maybe could he stretch it for the win, but I think today he knew that in these conditions, a couple of warnings, that was kind of his limit, that if I go 1% over here, or just even think about risking it, I could be on my backside here. So yeah, he played the race well today, and I'm very happy for him. It was great to see. And again, hopefully he finishes the season off strong, and if he can stay fit for the winter and come back next year, maybe he'd start next year better, and maybe start next year a bit like he did this year, just hopefully without the injury. So yeah, fair play to Joel. I'd say he's having probably even hasn't gone to sleep yet all these hours later.
Yeah, he's probably still buzzing. I think, yeah, you're right. He probably just decided no one wants to be the guy that crashes out of the first ever podium at home, do they? Suppose as well, you see Dennis on shoe as the guy attacking. You do think there's a chance maybe that you'll pick up the win still. So yeah, I think he made the right choice to sit back there, first ever podium. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be plenty more to come, because like you say, he seemed to make a big step over the winter, was good at Portimao, although I think he is a bit of a Portimao specialist. I think he was always quite good there in CV as well. But ever since that incident, obviously he was out for quite a lot of the season. Obviously we had like Almanza in for quite a while, obviously doing some heroics on that bike as well. I think the team has dropped off a little bit as well, because RT Gas was pretty good at the start of the season and seemed to have dropped back. So yeah, it's nice for him. I'm glad that he's staying in the class. It's always nice to see, just some other nationalities in there. I know obviously we already have Miller and MotoGP, for example, as an Australian, but you have so many European riders in the categories. It's good to see, because it's so difficult for them to come from Australia as well to actually make it happen. So it's good to see. And actually we should have 2 Aussies on the grid next year, which should be even better for the next Australian Grand Prix. But it was a pretty big race for the championship, of course. I don't know if we've actually even mentioned Sasaki yet, but the obviously pretty good race for him, because yes, he did lose out at the end to Dennis on shoe, but second place, whilst Masia, in fairness, did some decent damage limitation, because Masia was sort of about 15th at one point, and I think he ended up about 10th with all the people that sort of fell off in front of him. But in fact, he might have even been higher than that. Like, was he like 8th or 9th, something like that? But he got a few more points, which obviously helped him out. But for Sasaki, after that really bad race at obviously Indonesia, it looked like his championship was over, but he sort of sparked it back up by kind of having an inverse result, having a really good result, whilst Masia's not done so well, which is a pretty rare thing to happen these days. And yeah, it's closed everything back up a little bit, and we may still have a championship fight going on.
Yeah, Masia came on P8 today, which was probably the best he could have hoped for, really, because at one point he was down in P16 out of the point. So a decent recovery, right? Again, I'll come to him in a second, but for me, when Sasaki was 3rd, 2nd, 4th, leading for a bit, I didn't realise that the gap between him and Masia in the championship was actually that close. I thought it was a lot bigger. So when I saw at one point that it was down to 3 points, I was thinking, man, I've been banging on about Masia having nearly one hand in the trophy already, and the championship is still pretty wide open. So I was actually quite surprised watching that today. My maths and my ideology of the kind of championship currently standing was just a bit bit out of context at the moment, so it was funny to watch.
We probably focused on Holgado versus Masia too.
Probably,
yeah, probably gaining a lot of points on him.
Yeah,
probably some momentum as well that he's had, but yeah.
But with Sasaki today, he was pretty decent. Took to the lead early. He's another rider now, a bit like kind of Fernandez, where he's not a late breaker, nice corner speed, and in the wet that can be what wins your races. Go back all the way to Jerez 2011. Lorenzo won that one by like 30 seconds, smooth, could have not a heavy breaker. Not something you think of a wet rider back then, like, but that was before Assen 13, so he was still a half decent.
He was pretty good in the wet before that.
Yeah, but Sasaki did kind of everything he needed to do today. Big mistake in Indonesia. Whether it was a mistake or not, or it was just pot luck. To be honest, I do think last week I said in the podcast that was probably his championship done, but you see, we've talked about these every podcast we've done in these flyaways. Each week we say it. Anything can happen. Let's see what happens in Moto 2. Something kind of big happened there. You probably all know about that already, but just anything can happen. Championship rival can crash in a warm-up lap. They can have a bad race like this for Messi and stuff like that, and it's just anything can happen all around Valencia. So again, we go further into the championship now, and it's starting to tighten up again at the top. And Messi now, the pressure will be back on him to perform next time out. So it was a solid would be the result. It would have been a brilliant weekend if Sasaki could have won it. I just still think he lacks that winning mentality of it's last lap, I'm going to go and win it. And I think we're like an Anshu seems to just have that in his locker where it's a last lap and he's somehow going to find a way to make the overtake, whereas Sasaki just lacks that kind of cutthroat ability to pull an overtake somewhere. Or I know he was leading in this sense, but didn't have the ability to put in fastest lap of the race in the last lap to keep Anshu at bay and stuff like this. So I just think he lacks that small bit and might come back to bite him later on as we get down to the last couple of rounds. So in terms of Messia's weekend, probably the best he could hope for. Just one of those weekends where it didn't click. And again, if you went back a couple of seasons, a good recovery weekend, solid weekend for him. P8, that would have been a fabulous result for him if he could have consistently taken P8s 2 or 3 seasons ago. He might already had a world championship under his belt. He's shown that he can win races and he can get multiple podiums in consecutive results and stuff, but it's when things just aren't going for him is when he seems to overstretch, and he could easily crash out of P5 today trying to just take another 5-6 points back off of his championship rival. So again, 8th place today, 8 points, does lose out a good chunk to Sasaki, but I still think over the next couple of rounds Sasaki will probably lose more points again to Messi, especially if we have more kind of traditional dry race where it's elbow bashing the whole way to the finish line. So yeah, and I think we'll touch on, I suppose, briefly another DNA or non-score today or did he actually score points? I think he scored 14, didn't he? I actually got 13th.
Him and Josh Watley were like running out the last corner to the line, weren't they? Yeah,
so 3 points for Holgado. It's kind of again, he's just constantly misfiring, and I feel like it keeps each week we're like, oh, he's probably out of it. No, he's dropped more points, and again he's after dropping points. So it's going to be tough. He's going to need one of those weekends where he's Sasaki and he takes big points off his championship rivals. But this was the weekend to do it, and he was the one again dropping points. So it's probably 2-horse race now, maybe again down to Sasaki and Messia, Husqvarna, Honda down to the finish. Holgado just hasn't shown me anything since the midpoint of the season to make me think that he can turn around. Anytime we have any sort of weather or if we have one of those weird weekends, he seems to struggle as much as the rookies and stuff. So it's a bit of a worrying trait he has at the moment. So I think he's going to struggle to maybe again, like it is a second season, maybe just this season just came a bit too early from. And just when he started to make mistakes, he's just made one too many. And I think maybe we could probably rule him out of championship. But again, I could be saying the exact same thing the next podcast. That Messia crashes out, takes Sasaki with him, Holgado wins by 50 seconds, and Holgado looks like the championship favourite again. So again, Moto 3 is a lottery every week. But just on the current form, I think Holgado will struggle.
Yeah, pretty much since the summer break, he's kind of been on a downward spiral. He's had the odd couple of races, that's decent, but yeah, he has dropped back. And I think you touch on some good points there with Sasaki. Talk about that sort of killer mentality. He gets mugged on last laps more than anybody. I mean, how many times has he come into like the last sector of a race leading and then not won? Like a lot of times you can list. I mean, even to Onshu this year is twice. So yeah, it does kind of touch on him. And it probably, if he loses the championship, obviously he could very well win it. But if he loses the championship at the end of this year, you've got to say that's one of the main reasons why he's there's nothing wrong with his pace. He's there pretty much week in, week out, but he just doesn't have that aggression and that racecraft that the other riders have, like Masia and Onshu. I mean, I know Onshu is even further down, but he does have some very good racecraft underneath him, and even Holgado to an extent, positions himself better. But that's Sasaki's weak point, and always has been, is the last lap battle, really. But talking of that last lap, we may as well move on to Dennis Onshu, the race winner. We haven't mentioned him very briefly, but to be honest, I thought he was probably going to go down at one point. He had about 3 moments in about 3 corners at one point. And he really, really looked like he was on the ragged edge, and we've seen it happen before, but he sort of took a bit of stock, caught back up to the back of Sasaki, and then obviously just pulled that. Again, it was a very out of control pass down towards MG. Actually, by the time he'd leveled him, it was fine. But over the hill, as he hit the brakes, the bike really snapped sort of both ways. But fair enough to him, because he tried the lap before. He knew he couldn't slipstream Sasaki to the line, and he obviously just passed him in the corners and then pulled away in the last couple of corners and managed to hold it to the line. Probably, again, one of those riders you would say a bit bigger in these conditions probably does help him out, generate the temperature, because that was the main issue, really, was especially on the sort of I think it's the right hand side, especially, was the temperature was quite bad. So yeah, probably the one time it's an advantage, although he was still getting dragged to the line by Sasaki most laps. So yeah, I suppose he was losing out there. But yeah, pretty much a faultless race. He had those couple of errors, but I mean, there were a lot of moments really that he managed to save. So you can't really slate him too much. And that's win number 3 this season. So, never won a race before, and they all seem to just come at once. So yeah, just fantastic ride for Onshu once again. Bit of a shame for him, I guess, that he's not in the championship fight anymore, but I imagine he's mathematically still there. So if there's more races like this, maybe he can get his way back in. But I think his championship's probably over, and I'm sure he'll just be going for race wins till the end of the season now.
For me, with Onshu, since Saxony, he's been a different rider. Once he got that first win off the chest, ticked the box, got it done. He's been very, very good, and I've been very impressed with him. And today, again, just watching that last lap, I was thinking to myself on the penultimate lap, is like, I don't really see anywhere he can make the move. He wasn't close enough in all the kind of positions where you think, all right, he could try it here. And then he just found something that the top riders can do on the last lap, and he made the difference. The exact opposite of what we said about kind of Sasaki not being able to go that extra 1 or 2% when it's needed. Onshu, he's very, again, he's the part of the kind of Turkish Toprak school of out of control, always in control, that kind of weird, looks like he's going to all his crash, but somehow still stays on for 90% of it. And again, you mentioned the kind of 3 moments in 3 corners. There was 3 right-handers where he had a bobble, and then that was it. He kind of took stock and came back. And again, there was, I think, maybe one other bobble I can remember. He had a little twitch coming through turn 11, which is the penultimate corner, about 2 laps after Adrian Fernandez had crashed. So he just seemed to say that he got on very right conditions. He had no problem with the bike moving, and yeah, he was just so good in that last lap. I cannot believe he managed to make a move down into MG. Final corner, or final lap, should I say, one of those kind of dive bombs. And he wasn't even, it's not like he was right next to him and he just needed to level him and kind of set him up. He actually had to make time into that braking zone. So again, Onshu is going to be one to watch, I think, next year on a Moto 2 bike. The fact that he can control, like, he drifts a Moto 3 bike, and just nobody's ever done that. No one has ever been able to slide and kind of control a Moto 3 bike the way he has. So when he gets onto something with a bit of torque and having to adapt to a bit of engine braking, having the bike sliding, he could be a very, very, very quick Moto 2 rider, very quick next season. So again, watch out for him next year, because I think he'll do some special things when he gets his head around that 765 Triumph. So today, though, again, I don't have anything against him today. And I was very harsh on Onshu all the way up until he got his first win. I always felt like he was just a brainless and made silly mistakes and threw away so many opportunities. But there's been a massive change, just a switch since he won that Sachsenring race. For me, he's just a completely different rider, and he's really interesting to watch. And if we kind of took maybe from Sachsenring to now, I'd love to see what the kind of championship standings would look like. I'd say he's a lot closer than wherever he is now in the championship standings. I'd say he's with the third win now in as many races is in Sachsenring. That's pretty tidy going, and he's been there most weeks. So again, he's showing, even with the disadvantage of being bigger in that class, he's still showing that he's one of probably top 3 riders in the class, which is not easy going.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, even before that win, he finished P2 at Mugello after being dominant all weekend. So he's had pace, and even last year, I think up until sort of almost halfway, he was kind of in the championship fight, like roughly in terms of points, even though he didn't really feel that way. But he did sort of drop off after the halfway point, and it seems like this time it's kind of the opposite. He was kind of there or thereabouts, but seemed to have picked up in the second half of the season. And if it wasn't for maybe a couple of little silly errors, he'd be up there. I mean, remember how much we slated him at Argentina? Like, I mean, that could have been decent points, because clearly he's shown today he's good in the wet. So if he hadn't tried to rush that race, maybe he'd have 25 more points under his belt, and all of a sudden we're talking about how Onchu's taking the lead of the championship with Masia at the back end of the top 10. So yeah, I think you're right. I think he will be pretty interesting to watch in Moto 2 next season. And speaking of Moto 2, we'll head on to that category now. And similar to Moto 3, again, there was some more outlap crashes, but a very, very big one this time. Although I suppose we had a championship contender last time, but we had the championship leader, Pedro Acosta, crashing on the sighting lap. And unlike most of the people that crashed on the sighting lap in Moto 3, he wasn't able to actually finish the sighting lap, so he wasn't actually able to get to the grid. So he therefore had to start from the back of the grid at the beginning of the race, which is not what you want in the wet conditions, especially in the extra treacherous wet conditions we had today with the wind and the low temperature. And he did a fantastic job, didn't he, Pedro Acosta? I mean, to come through to the top 10 in what wasn't even a full race distance, and just the way he did it, all his passes looked really good. He did look a bit stiff on the bike, which I suppose he would be after that crash. And again, it's one of those races where he perhaps could have just trundled around the back thinking he had a big championship lead, but still moved forward, got back up into a decent position. And aside from the little sighting lap crash, which is so easy to do, a pretty good recovery. It's just one of those things. He got away quite lucky, I guess, that he didn't damage the bike more or pick up an injury from that crash, because it's something so easy that can happen, especially when it is these crashes they don't expect. They're not so ready for it. Sometimes it can be even worse.
Yeah, and the thing is, again, now I touched on it in the Moto 3, where you come out for your sighting lap, you go down turn 1, turn 2. He had a small slide in turn 2, and that was on the left side of the tyre. And we, again, in the build up to the race, after he had crashed, Casey on TNT Sports, Casey Stoner was kind of just talking it through, kind of how it happened. And he's saying that he had a small slide, and kind of just something that would keep you kind of conscious that the tyres aren't ready coming out of turn 2. And he said that the fact that he had that slide coming into Miller Corner, coming around, that he was just coasting through, and he just taps the throttle and think comes straight around. So Casey was adamant that it was a dud tyre. I've seen Pedro saying that it's one of his most silly mistakes he's ever made in his career. So again, we'll kind of never know if Pedro's come out saying that it's his mistake. He's probably telling the truth, but there probably is if Casey Stoner is saying that looks like a bit of a dud tyre, the fact that he was having a slide going left, a slide going right, and that threw him off. So Casey has a bit of weighing power when it comes into these kind of situations. He does know what he's talking about, so there might have been something there as well. But gets back to the grid, they start stripping it back down, get it going. He doesn't make it out, so he has to start from the back of the grid and finishes P9 after the race, got red flagged. Main championship rival wins the race, but down at P9, what's that, 6-7 points? It's only probably 18 points he's lost.
Half points, it's not that bad.
So yeah, with half points. I
think it's only about 9, so it's like as if you finish third in a normal race.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got off pretty lucky, really, considering. I mean, obviously he did the great job to get back up into that top 10, but because I suppose this will come on to in a second, there was loads of people that absolutely did not get in the top 10. But it was he's got away quite lucky with the 50% points, I'd say.
Like, I always feel with Moto 2, it's always the crash fest race of the weekend. It's always just, I've said it, I think maybe it was the last podcast I done before that, the track temperature is always slightly different. It's just changing, it's just getting a little hot and greasy. If we're back to Misano, that was a crash fest for Moto 2. Catalunya, I believe, was the same. There was plenty of crashes in that. And could even been Indonesia as well, there's plenty of crashes. I think most weeks Moto 2 seems to usually be the attritional race where a lot of people go down. Again, this weekend was the same, but with the weather, it was so different from their morning warm-up. People were going off on the sighting lap. People had no grip. So many experienced riders. Like, when the top 4 riders in the race went out in a lap and a half, I want to say. Was it roughly a lap and a half to 2 laps?
Yeah.
That just shows that the conditions are ridiculous. We had our race leader and second place crash through the hay shed in about half a second of each other. That could have been really messy, that crash with Garcia and Philip Salic. Jake Dixon gets up into third behind Sam Lowe. Sam crashes right in front of him. Jake crashes 6 corners later. And like, fair enough, Salach, decent experience, rookie of Garcia, you go right, rookie error, but between Jake Dixon and Sam Lowe's, I can only imagine how many race starts they have in the class. It must be well into the hundreds between them. So they are two
How many
experienced.
races have they done in cold, wet conditions as well?
Exactly. They would be the two riders. When I saw them, when I saw Arbolino, it was either Dixon Sam or Sam and Dixon, whatever order they're in, I was just thinking, yeah, that's your podium there, realistic. Them two lads aren't going to trot away and win a lap. They both had been, and again, it just shows how treacherous it was if the two of them are crashing, because they are definitely well used to riding in cold, windy, wet tracks like that. So just shows off how hard it was. We had Zonta crashing out. We had then his teammate crashing out. And that was again within like half a lap. The two RW bikes had crashed. It was
not
just
a good lap for RW, that one.
No, it was just one of those weekends where everyone was crashing, or one of them races, should I say, where everyone just seemed to be not even making mistakes, just getting bit by small little maybe errors, small. Anything could happen in that race, and they ended up on the ground, and that's what I kind of think made Acosta's race so impressive, that he came back from so far back. Now, he was at one point doing 5 seconds a lap slower than Arbolino in the lead, so he probably was overtaking people at such a slower rate because they were so much off the speed, but at the same time he got back to P9. Dixon didn't finish.
Pretty sure Arbolino was like 2 seconds quicker than like everybody though at that point. Like,
yeah,
he wasn't that far off relative.
Yeah, relatively, exactly. Arbolino was the outlier. He was so far ahead, but it was you just don't see gaps of 5 seconds per lap unless they're on different tires or something. But it just shows how good Arbolino really is in that condition. And again, for me, it
he was
really
like 15, 16 seconds in the lead, wasn't he, when they got stopped?
Yeah,
wasn't even halfway through the race yet, so it's like
he is really you don't get wet weather specialists really anymore, but he's probably one of the last of them because he just seems to have so much feeling in the wet. And to be honest with you, I don't ever remember him in the snipers days on the Honda Motor 3 ever being anything special in the rain. So it just seems to be something that he's found when he's moved up to the Calyx Moto 2 bike. But to finish up with Pedro. Again, we talked about this for weeks and weeks, that things can happen in the flyaways. These little errors. We saw Sasaki crash in a warm-up lap sighting lap last week out. This week it was a couple of other Moto 3, and then Dixon or Acosta easily could have been his race over. He could have been. You saw what happened to Moreira. Moreira remounted, did a couple of laps and had to come in, and that was his race done. Acosta gets really lucky with the fact he gets stopped half point, and also he made it back to a really respectable P9. So again, it just feels like everything, even when Acosta has bad luck, he still has enough speed and fortune and skill to get a bit of good luck to come back to him. And today he did a brilliant job to recover, so he didn't really lose much. And I think it's even when he's losing points, you still don't think he's going to lose the championship, just because of how well he recovered, and everything kind of went in his favour after that little spill.
Yeah, I mean, the gap was so big anyway. It's like we said, he got quite lucky with the way it went. But I mean, I'm sure he would have got higher up the order himself anyway. I think he was basically on the back of the battle for like P5. So I think he probably would have been able to still score quite well, even in a full points race. But yeah, you got to have that sometimes, the look at that. I mean, he still stayed in the race. Think about how many riders you listed there that fell off. We probably still missed some. That's the thing. That there's probably more riders that fell off in that race as well. So yeah, just to stay on is impressive, and for both of them, really. And you say there's not really any wet weather specialists anymore. I kind of agree, because I see what the point is with that one. But I feel like in Moto 2, I think Moto 2 is the hardest class in the rain, and I think you can maybe get wet weather specialists because of that, because I'm not saying the Dunlop tyres are bad, but the Michelin tyres in MotoGP, the wet weather ones, are so good. Like, everyone that jumps onto a MotoGP bike for the first time in the rain, it's like, whoa, like the grip is unbelievable. It can get your knee down. It's literally like riding in the dry, basically. So all the rookies always talk about how good the wet tyres are there. You also have the really advanced electronics and stuff to smoothen out everything. And I think even in Moto 3 you have that to an extent, but in Moto 2 you don't really have any electronics. The tyres are probably not quite as, amazing in the wet conditions compared to the MotoGP ones. Obviously the bikes are quite heavy, very rigid. They're all basically on the same bike, so there's not so much you can really change setup wise to make a difference, or you're not going to have the bike advantage over someone. So you had that same kind of, we're all on the same equipment, we all have to push over that extra bit, but it's also in the rain. The bike's not helping you out so much, the tyres aren't as good. So I think it does kind of allow riders to have that little bit extra, and I think Arbolino clearly has that, and I don't know how really, but like you say, I don't think I don't really remember it being a thing in Moto 3. Maybe it was, and we just can't remember. But I don't seem to remember him being particularly great. Maybe having like Fanati as his teammate through that period for a bit probably made it look worse, because Fanati was always very good in the wet conditions. Maybe that's where he learned it from. Don't know, but yeah, just that's why I just wanted to kind of bring that up. Say I think actually in Moto 2 you probably still can have with the specialists because of that. But yeah, Arbolino was ridiculous today, like absolutely ridiculous. And we've seen it before, and he was miles in front, and he would have. Well, he already had lapped Lopez, but I suppose Lopez was like 4 laps down. But I think he would have been lapping quite a lot of people if it was a full length race. Well, there probably wouldn't have been that many people left, but yeah, I think he would have been clear. It would have been so clear. It would have been unbelievable. It literally would have been one of the most dominant victories you've ever seen. Most likely, he was so far up the road. But of course, the race did get stopped, and initially it kind of seemed a bit surprising because from the TV cameras, it didn't look like the weather had really got any worse. It didn't look like the rain had obviously got any worse. But the thing was, the wind had got worse, and that's not something we can really see from the TV. And Celestino Vietti had just crashed right before the red flag came out, so it was quite sort of clear to be like, okay, there's probably connection there somehow. And as it turned out, I don't know if you have seen the crash. I mean, I don't think it was shown live. Well, obviously it wasn't shown live. I don't think it was part of the broadcast, but there is actually a clip of it. Basically, going down towards turn 1, Doohan's corner, ridiculously fast corner, it gets blown off the circuit by the wind, and he basically goes up the curb and just ramps up it and goes flying through the air. Like he's very lucky to be able to get up and walk away from it. It's a horrendous accident. A very, very fast part of the circuit, a bit reminiscent, I guess, of that Zarco Marc Marquez crash a few years ago, where Zarco clipped the back of Marc's bike and sort of went up in the air. But yeah, just I think that's why I guess the race was stopped, because they were aware that the wind was so bad it was pushing riders off the circuit, and clearly the right choice. But yeah, nasty crash, that one, and just terrible conditions. So yeah, whilst at first it seemed a surprise that the race had been stopped, like it was obviously clear why, and also according to Arbolino Costa, the rain had got a little bit worse as well. So yeah, you can see why race direction made the correct decision to stop the race at that point.
Yeah, and according to Pecco, I know I don't remember this at all, but apparently it happened to Miguel Oliveira as well at one point.
Yeah, it did. It's like 2019 or something. I'm pretty sure they red flagged a practice session because of it, I think.
Yeah, where he seemed to get pushed off, and just because a gust of wind caught it and pushed him. So it is it's not completely unheard of to see extreme winds pushing riders. And essentially, if you haven't seen the clip, first off, I've linked in the Discord. That'll be in the link of, or the bottom of my description if you're watching YouTube. All you have to do is search Vietti Phillip Island crash. It will be out there. There's many clips of it I've seen online. It's essentially, as Rhys described, he's coming down to turn 1, and as he goes to lean in, it's just like a gust of wind just pushes him, and he's kind of just, it looks like he rides, if you don't have the idea, if you don't know that the wind is pushing him, it looks like he just has complete kind of brain fade, and he just gets up on the curb, goes off the edge of the curb and goes into a bit of a dip, and then just is, from there you're just kind of hoping that one day doesn't hit anything, and it's a peaceful slide along some wet grass, and then slowly brings them to a stop in the gravel. And thankfully, someone who just came back from injury doesn't look to be injured, so he's got away with that massively, because we saw, again, you mentioned the Zarco Marquez crash in, was it 17, 18?
I think it was 18.
Yeah. And that was, you just saw the speed and how crazy that was, and in the end then it was just a horrible crash. And again, we're both quite glad that Vietti in the end got away with that one, because that could have been a horrible crash. Again, I was thinking when I was writing these notes, is there any corner you can think of that's worse to crash on entry to in the GP calendar? There's one on my mind that I know of that would be probably as scary. It's just probably a hard one to throw to you, but I'm going to throw it to you now. Any other corner, doesn't have to be just a turn 1, like that, you'd be as scared to crash an entry than McDoon's and Phillip Island?
Maybe the Rams hook at Assen.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one actually.
Right one, yeah, the really fast left at the end of the lap. Yeah, it's one of those corners that really is Cop's corner at Silverstone. Probably again similar kind of. Maybe it's not quite as fast, but probably another one where you wouldn't particularly want to crash. But yeah, there's not really many corners. I suppose I could probably think about it if I sat there and think about it. But yeah, like the point is still there. I mean, I'd love to know the track you had in mind. But
Carvone was the one at Misano.
Oh yeah, of course, Carvone.
That's probably is the fastest corner on the calendar. Like so.
Yeah, you don't want to be crashing there.
I've stunned on the outside of that. It is a bit scary seeing it go through there. But again, the thing with doings as well is if you are to crash the out, so basically there is some positive banking going through turn 1 of Phillip Island into turn 1. You just need to hold you, but if you go over the edge of that, it just drops away and drops down into the grass. So you kind of get accelerated down the hill if you crash there. It's not a nice place to crash. So it definitely would be a scary one. And again, the fact that it wasn't like he was braking, getting to full lean, and then he was still upright when he was pushed off the track. So it was scary. And again, we're really lucky that it ended up the way it was. And again, I think the fact they saw race direction, saw it, or was whoever saw it, and they straight away red flagged it, they made the correct decision, because as you mentioned, Acosta and Arbolino mentioned that the rain got a little bit heavier. And already we had such a crazy race in terms of incidents and mistakes and just crashes from riders that you just don't expect in these conditions. So it clearly wasn't the ideal conditions. And in the end, that actually was the last few laps of the whole race weekend. So yeah, it was definitely the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously the weather that was predicted. That's the reason why the schedule was changed in the first place. They probably pretty much knew that by the time the MotoGP race was coming around, that if it was as predicted, it would be impossible to race. So that's why they moved the GP race to Saturday, and then obviously put the sprint afterwards. It's not so bad to cancel the sprint race as it would be to cancel the main race. But yeah, I'd imagine probably Marshall saw the crash, probably radioed in. You see how they sort of communicate, but like, yeah, it's just been blown off the circuit. So that's probably why they brought the red flag out, and clearly was the right decision, as the MotoGP sprint that was supposed to be afterwards didn't go ahead. So I suppose that's the first point. I suppose there's not really anything to say about it. Is that they saw this weather coming, they swapped the races around, so we had the main race on the Saturday, and obviously these conditions happened, so they cancelled the sprint. Probably easier for them to just be like, okay, we'll just cancel the sprint than it is for the main race. Now, I don't know what will happen if there'll be any refunds tickets wise, because I guess moving the schedule around will have maybe caused some problems. Probably not, because I guess there's still some racing. The whole day wasn't cancelled, so I guess maybe they're not. I remember seeing people saying stuff online about it, even as early as sort of like Friday, when we kind of found out that it was being moved around, because people were like, well, they've paid for a Sunday ticket and the main race is on the Saturday, which is fair enough. But yeah, I suppose that's pretty much the only thing that remains to be seen with it. But yeah, the sprint was obviously cancelled due to the weather conditions.
Yeah, so really the thing is, it's always the issue with Dorna and the cancelling the tickets, because like the event technically went ahead, it just got changed, so it's a whole messy thing now. I completely stand by him for changing, for being proactive, not reactive. Imagine we were sitting here now thinking that we got a lovely sprint on Saturday, and then we're sitting here thinking we're after cancelling the main event of the weekend. At least that they were ready for it. They made the right decision in my eyes to switch it to Saturday.
Yeah, I think so.
Pushing a Sunday sprint and not missing the sprint, it's not the main issue. I can see it, right, though. A lot of people buy a Sunday ticket, they head down to the track for Sunday, get 3 races and a warm-up in, and that's their your yearly visit to the GP calendar, kind of the GP circuit. To be fair, your diehard fans go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, morning to night. But again, I understand not everyone can do that. Young kids, long distance traveling, prices of tickets, and just everything that goes with it. I can understand that people like to go for three hours of a Saturday or Sunday, just to see a couple of races, and that's what they're happy with. But I'd imagine now that there's going to be a lot of inquest into trying to at least give some money back for it, because again, not only did you, if you got a Sunday ticket, did you miss the main race, you also missed the main event of Sunday, which then would have been the sprint. So you have technically missed your main, the big boys going out on track essentially. So if I was a local who came down a couple of kilometers on Sunday and didn't get to see the GP boys race in either a sprint or a main race, you'd be disappointed. So I can understand why people are a little upset. But yeah, it was, again, we both stand by perfectly good decision to switch the sprint and the main race round. Again, like I said, it was nice that they were reactive to it on time. They didn't leave it all play out and then kind of sit there twiddling thumbs when it was 100-mile-an-hour winds and the place was soaked, and then thinking, we can't go on this. So again, the fact that we got our main race was good from Dorna. They got their decisions done early and got everything kind of on board. So yeah, fair play to them in that sense.
Yeah, it was clearly a good decision. I mean, I'm sure in the olden days they probably would have just swapped like Moto 3 and MotoGP around or something like that. That's
Yeah,
probably what they
probably.
would have done instead. And it actually kind of raises an interesting question: should they like make 2 full races a weekend instead of a sprint and a full race? Because clearly there's the time on Saturday to do it. So it would be quite interesting because it's only an extra 20 minutes, I guess, because they're still doing a race, and so it's only a slightly longer race. It's not necessarily quite as bad I know it's just kind of not something we had in the notes, but just something I did just think of. Don't know if maybe to pass that back to you, but it would be maybe an interesting experiment to try 2 races. I don't know, maybe if it dilutes it, but so we've seen how successful it is in most superbike categories to have 2 races a weekend. So, and obviously we already kind of do with the sprint and the main race. But what would you think about 2 full races a weekend?
I think riders would be against it because I think already a sprint qualifying whole day Friday, whole day Sunday. I think already riders feel like they're under limits with the amount of races and race weekends. So I know an extra 20 minutes of the race isn't in the grand scheme of things massive, but if for example if it was India or the heat of Malaysia or one of those where it's red hot and you have to do an extra 20 minutes boat races or on a Saturday race, we'll say it becomes a bit of an issue. So I like the format we have currently with the sprint. I like the fact that if we have 2 main races, it could kind of get a bit dull. Like, again, we'll throw back to World Superbikes. Those race weekends there where you knew Alvaro one way or the other will get to the front. And if you have them race weekends where, like, the special thing about GP was, perfect example, Laguna 2008, that was Stoner's to win. Rossi won that day because he made that race change halfway through by constantly pestering Stoner. If you've 2 or more races a race weekend, you can't keep doing that because the whole point is midway through a race, you can't change everything up. You can't change the setup. You can't go, well, yesterday I had 70% of my tyre gone off the harsh race and I'm going to have to change my mapping now. You can't have all that extra knowledge. Going into the race with a little less knowledge is usually better for the racing because we have this whole kind of show of, right, that didn't work. We probably didn't get the GP race that we were going to get on Sunday if the sprint goes ahead and we go and if Martin goes out and uses a soft rear and go, right, towards the end of that race, it was just starting to spin. I don't see how I can make that last a full sprint or a full main race. He goes out, he wins the main race by 4 seconds on the medium. And there's no mad last lap battle for the win. So I'm kind of in favour of less data going into a race, a bit more known, a bit more like the old days where there was no sprint. You had no FP4 just to focus on the bike, that you had your kind of Friday or Saturday or qualifying, rock up Sunday morning, do a 20-minute warm-up just to make sure everything's good, and then you go Sunday for your race. No, I still like the format of the sprint. It's something different, but I just think it takes a small bit out of the Sunday race in terms of strategy and the unknown. You kind of already know roughly what the story is going to be like on Sunday after seeing a sprint. You just think, right, he needs to try something different. They're going to try something different with this. And there's a couple of different questions come out of it. But the overall, can he make them tires last? Does he have the speed to go with him? All these little mini stories that go out through a race, again, kind of get lost when you have 2 races. But again, more bikes and track, it's kind of a 50-50 kind of, again, like you said, does it get diluted? And I think it does get diluted with more races, but is it more racing, more fun? I don't know. It's kind of it's hard really to answer it, really, to be honest.
Yeah, it certainly is tricky. I mean, to be honest, in terms of the purist point of view, I can see that. Yeah, I prefer not to have 2 races at all. I'd prefer probably just to have the Grand Prix like it was before. I could definitely feel and you're definitely right with the sprint. Definitely impacts the main race. Like having that extra data, we've seen it. It's actually played into some riders' hands more than others. I've seen Bagnaia use the data from the sprint to win Grand Prix a couple of times this season, and definitely races he wouldn't have won other than that. So yeah, it is one of those things where I probably prefer actually just to have the one main race. Don't get me wrong, I do like the sprints. I think they're quite exciting, and I don't know what probably about this time last year our opinions would have been said at the time. We probably would have been like, it'd be open to it, see what it's like. But yeah, obviously we're kind of used to it now, so it's the normal format. Just I was thinking that maybe if we're going to have 2, may as well have 2 full-length races. But yeah, I think you probably hit the nail on the head. It'd be even worse because they'd know every little bit of data, whereas at least with the sprint, they know up to half race distance, but things could still go a little bit awry. So yeah, it'd be probably maybe not the best idea. But you did make some mentions there of Jorge Martin and his tyre gamble in the main race on on the Saturday, with the soft rear tyre, along with a couple of the riders, Marc Marquez, Raul Fernandez, Paulo Espargaro, I believe, were the guys that went on them. Worth noting that Marquez actually tried it last year and finished second place, almost won the race. So it's not just completely out of nowhere. Like it is based on that last year's gamble. And because it lasted, I think a few of them decided to risk on it. Obviously, Marquez tried it again. And up until basically the last, 2 miles of the race, it looked like it had worked. It looked like it was the right call for Martin because he absolutely bolted from the start, did quite a big lead. It slowly eroded away. And starting that last lap, he was just about half a second in front. If there was one lap less, he'd have won the race. So it is one of those things where it probably was the wrong decision, but it was so close. It wasn't a ridiculous one, though, because he actually almost made it work. And I think that's the crazy part. He almost made the soft last, and it would be quite difficult for him to actually save the tyre a little bit more. If he'd just done that, maybe he would have been able to win the race. But even still, you got to commend the guy for going for it. But I don't know about you, but I feel like he was the quickest guy all weekend, like quite clearly. And why did he not just go with the majority? Because he would have easily won the race on the medium tyre, I'm fairly certain. I suppose he didn't want to get involved in the battle and maybe risk getting knocked off. Is it maybe because of what happened in Mandalika, he wanted to sort of deal a blow to Pecco, dominate the race or something? But to me, I suppose the soft tyre gamble, it almost worked, and fair play to him for that one. And obviously it's based off the Marquez gamble from last year. But if you're that quick, is it not just better to just go with the same tyre as everybody else?
Yeah, it's... The reason behind it is I'm still a bit unsure, to be brutally honest, but I don't really... I know all weekend he was favouring the soft rear and he was trying to do as many long runs on it, so I think he definitely favoured it, but I still think he had the speed to make a medium work and at least beat Pecco. And I think after the mistake or the crash, we'll say, in Indonesia, this weekend he needed to take 2 results off of Pecco and take, whether it be 4, 6, 10 points off him, whereas he's actually lost points on Saturday by trying to go a different route to everyone. Again, 99 times out of 100, if you're going on a different tyre to 85% of the grid, you're probably going to get it wrong. There's not many times that every other rider on the grid gets it wrong. There is the odd occasion, it has happened, but it's not usually the way it goes. Usually the majority are right, and I think on Saturday it was better to play it safe. It's for me, it's a weird one to even risk in a championship scenario, because he was ahead of Pecco on the grid, I believe, wasn't he? Where did he qualify?
Yeah, Pecco was 6th or something, and he was on pole. And he was on a very commanding pole, and
there you go, exactly.
Top in practice sessions, and
so it's like I see your point of does he want to go out and try to win by 10 seconds to make Pecco think, Christ, I'm going to
that's not the only thing I can think, because he knows that he had the blow in the last one, and clearly over the weekend Pecco was still quite weak. He clearly still feels on the back foot, and I think the general consensus is he's still on the back foot, even though he gained some of the points. In terms of the actual pace, he's obviously not quite got Martin's pace at the moment. But that's the only reason I could think that he wanted to go on the soft was to destroy him, but he ended up destroying his soft and losing to him. So yeah, it just seems bizarre.
It was just, again, it was weird. And you just don't take, if you're coming into a race weekend, the golden rule is you go on what your championship rival is going on. If you're on the wrong, look at BSB Donington race 1. Was that the wet one where they were on the wrong tyres?
Yeah, they're both on the Inters, and
you match each other. You're either first and second together, or you're 21st and 22nd together, and at least it just, this situation doesn't happen where you finish first and your main rival is second. And again, now it doesn't sound as drastic, but it should have been him winning and his main rival third, and then there's another swing of 9 points in his favour. The championship goes back to about 10 points, and you're thinking, right, it's back on. He wins the sprint next time out, he could almost be nearly level with him, and then he could leave the next round back leading, and then the whole championship's open again. Whereas he's thrown away another 10 points, maybe 20, about 8 points.
Yeah, if you calculate the actual swing, where he'd have he finished 5th, didn't he? So he lost 11 points just from not 11. It's just 14 basically. He got 14 less, and Bagnaia got 4 more.
Yeah,
so it's like a swing of 18. Yeah,
so it's huge for the championship. And again, probably still think that Martin is quicker overall, but this is a weird decision for him to make. And again, he said himself with about 6 laps to go, the spin just got so bad that he knew he was in trouble. And to be fair, he led all the way up to Miller Corner at the last lap. All he needed was, like, into Siberia, you don't really make an overtake.
He needed his teammate to not set him up, I guess. It's ultimately what he needed.
Yeah, I suppose.
His teammate to be a better wingman. But
the thing is, I don't. I take out the fact that it was Zarco's first win. I don't think he can defend him. I think Pecco or Martin was that slow. I think, if you try and you're backing yourself up and you're just putting yourself in trouble, because we saw that
he maybe finishes 4th or 3rd is more what I'm aiming at, because Binder only got him out the last corner. But if he doesn't lose the extra spot to Bagnaia, that's an extra couple of corners that maybe he stays in front.
But the fact Digi got him through the hay shed and Binder was going to pass Digi into the hay shed, but again, it was one of those, like, you can't pass a guy who's passing the guy in front of you. It's kind of one of those things. So
true.
I think the soft tyre in the end was the wrong decision, regardless of if Zarco should
it
or
went
not.
wrong for all of them. Like, Marquez got beat by Quartararo at the end. I don't know what happened to Paul and Raul Fernandez, really, but I think they both dropped back too. So
Paul 18th, Fernandez did not finish.
There you go.
DNF. So oh, sorry, was it Raul Fernandez or Augusto?
It was Raul.
Oh, he was P16. He was behind Marquez. Beat
Yeah.
Morbidelli
Yeah,
though, so don't know what the hell's going on there. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Still, just for me, it was just a weird decision in the first place to go with the soft tire. If you're that quick, a medium tire, again, maybe it wasn't given. Maybe all weekend he just didn't have the feeling with it. But surely, like, he wasn't doing like one-off lap times to put himself clear on a soft. He was quick through the whole weekend and everything. So it was just a weird one, really, for me. But I just don't really understand the thinking behind it, because again, the majority went with the medium. He went to soft and a bit him, and it's definitely a big swing in the championship.
We could be looking back at this at the end of the season saying this is why he lost it.
100%.
He definitely is quicker. I mean, coming into this round as well, it's like, he was was the gap like 18 points or something? Or I can't remember exactly what the gap was, but I think it was something like that. It's like at that point, it's still in his hands. He only has to just sort of finish well, like every race in front of Bagnaia, and that lead can be eroded in the amount of races that are left quite convincingly.
Yeah.
But now it's like over a race win's worth, he kind of needs Bagnaia to make a mistake again. I think technically, if he just keeps finishing well again, I think it's still possible. So it's not completely over, but now he can't like lose to Bagnaia in a round, whereas like before it was, something he could do. Bagnaia was like rapid at like Malaysia or something, he could take second to him or whatever, but now he's got to go out and win every race. And I think this could definitely be a point where we're like, remember when Martin threw away that championship by going on the soft tyre at Phillip Island for some reason? Seems like a very bizarre thing to do. But since we're talking about Pecco, we may as well talk about him. Obviously came home second again, didn't look great this weekend, had to come through Q1 for I think that's the 3rd weekend in a row, so something that he'd really improved at the beginning of the season. Not that he was ever bad at it before, but his one lap pace had become phenomenal. The amount of poles he took early on in the season, that was previously a Martin strength that he kind of took from Martin. Martin wasn't doing so well in the one laps, but it seems to swap back again now. And Bagnaia, last 3 rounds, like I said, go through Q1. Then just didn't look like comfortable the whole time. Come race day, did seem to have made a step. So similar, I guess, to Mandalika. I guess all that data from the other Ducatis over the weekend it's very helpful to them. They clearly made make good setup tweaks with it, and he looked better in the race. But again, he obviously didn't have the pace of. He didn't even have the pace of Zarco. Like, he didn't have the pace of Martin. Definitely not. I mean, he was battling with Digi Antonio for a lot of the race, and Brad Binder. So, like, don't get me wrong, the race was good, but it wasn't like he was quicker than Martin. But just by picking the right tire, going away with that group, just playing it safe, making sure he looked after his tire, he's ended up showing that World Championship experience. Even though he was on the back foot again this weekend in terms of the pace, he's ended up extending his lead.
For me, this is one of the most experienced races we've had from. It was most kind of calm races, because most of the race he was like battling privateer, or I say privateers if it's the 80s. Satellite Ducatis, he was battling against him. Again, now, Phillip Island is one of those tracks where the rider probably makes a bit more difference, can't use as much right height device. Aero probably still doesn't make isn't as critical as other tracks, shall we say. So
they were all stripping it off for the wind, weren't they?
Pretty much so.
The old aero and stuff. So, yeah, it's actually a hindrance more.
A spirited Di Giannantonio, Zarco sniffing a race win for the first time. You can understand why they were probably giving it 105%, whereas Pecco, he just seemed to be going, right, well, if you're going to pass me, I'm going to stay here. It was one of those races where you go back to I remember Brno 2018, and it was a massive race with tyres, and I think with about 4 laps to go, people actually went. And up until then, it was just manage your tyres. Nobody stressed their tyres. And I feel Pecco did that pretty well. He just stayed in the group. At no point did he look like he had made a switch that he was going to go. And then we got to the last couple of laps, and he just slowly made his moves, got into P3 onto the last lap, gets ahead of Martin, and then unfortunately just couldn't pip Zarco at the line. But he just positioned himself so well, and such a really experienced race from him that he knew where he had to be when he had to be there. And again, the fact that he beat Martin and gets P2 in all race, it looked like he didn't have the speed because he looked to be just managing a small bit, and just shows why he's won so many races and that he is so good on his day when he brings the whole package together. He is one of the better riders on the field, and it's just a real solid race weekend for him, and such a good recovery to get back from the rough kind of Friday, and then getting another great qualifying, and then in the race he just did exactly what he needed to do. He took points off Martin, lovely podium, did everything right on the Sunday race on Saturday. So it was in the end one of his better weekends that he's had in recent time, considering the where the title is going a little bit more to Martin's favour with the speed. But yeah, Pecco did very well this weekend to recover points again.
Yeah, I mean, again, the same thing happened at Mandalika. Again, he was clearly not as quick as Martin, but just by staying on and being aggressive in those opening laps, he was able to gain the points on him. And again, today, just by playing a bit safe, because I don't think he was obviously thinking at the time that, oh yeah, I might be able to beat Martin if I look after my tyre. I think everyone had given up on him at that point, but he was obviously looking at trying to pass the likes of Digi and Brad Binder maybe later on in the race. So yeah, it was one of those better rides from Bagnaia, and definitely used his head and ended up benefiting quite a bit from it. But we've got to talk about Di Giannantonio, right? Because the last few rounds, he's just become like a new rider completely, and it's just so good to see for him. But it's a shame that it's kind of come too late. Apparently, as it's come out, is that pretty much all the Ducatis run the same stock like base setting, and just sort of deviate from that a little bit here and there to suit the individual riders. So that's kind of how Ducati run it. And just Di Giannantonio has not got on with that base setting at all. He's not liked it at all. Obviously, last year he had a rookie crew chief as well, who was probably more willing to just go with what the Ducati engineers were telling him. So that's probably bad. And then obviously this year, Frankie Carcetti, again, was probably new to Ducati, so didn't want to maybe deviate too much from the norm. But then Digi's just not getting on with it, and they've gone, all right, let's just change some things not randomly. Of course, they have the correct, obviously, way of going about it, but let's just change the bike radically. Yeah, that's more what I was looking for, rather than randomly, radically, and just see how you get on. And he's got the feeling on it, and he's just doing absolutely amazing. So, yeah, it's really, really great to see. Battling up there, getting his first podium in MotoGP. Obviously, the race before is P4 in a bit of an attritional round. You know, he was looking pretty quick all weekend in both of them. I mean, he was through to Q2 in Phillip Island. So he's been, ever since Marc Marquez basically has got that seat, Di Giannantonio has been performing a lot more. And he said he's not signed anything yet because he wants to just try and hang on into MotoGP, and depends on how the rider market plays out. And maybe that's possible now that he's got this podium. You know, he's probably going to be on some teams, especially the satellite teams, if there's any of the slots open up, with like Oliveira rumored to be leaving RNF. Like maybe Razlan will take a bit of a punt on Digi now that he's got a podium and stuff. And such a nice guy as well, Digi, and not someone that we really like think of as being really, really successful throughout the different categories, because I think they were saying that he's only ever won 3 Grand Prix, 2 in Moto 3 and 1 in Moto 2. And he was kind of like that in Moto 2 and Moto 3. He'd kind of be nowhere most of the season and have the odd good weekend. And that was kind of how he went. In Moto 3 was a bit more week in, week out competitive. But in Moto 2 especially, he'd be there one week and kind of nowhere the next. But yeah, we've never seen this kind of performance from him. Like 2 weeks in a row, right up there at the front. And so happy for him to get a podium, because yeah, it's one of those things where it's so easy to just fall out of the championship, and potentially could still happen to him, but at least he's going to go out with having a podium under his belt.
Yeah, the perfect example is Canada at the moment, where some weekends he just does nothing, and then the next weekend he's like third and second, and he's on pole and stuff. That was a bit like the way Digi was a couple of years back in that class. At the moment, the fact that, first off, I go back to the Frankie Carchetti just set up the whole thing. He's been on that bike for 2 years. The fact that they've not, again, I know crew chiefs changed and stuff like that, but again, the fact they haven't gone, right, let me try something a bit radical, let me just stick the rake angle a little bit out further, and let's see what that does to you, and just see, does it give you a bit more feeling and stuff like that. The fact is taking them down to the part where they're out of a job before I go, right, well, might as well try something now. Surely that's not great management, whether it's either been from Carchetti, Digi, the Ducati side. It's just, that's not great. You just don't like hearing things that, oh, well, like, it was the same thing with McPhee a couple of years ago. He was like...
last year, even. I think.
Was it last year at Phillip Island?
Yeah,
Sepang.
Sepang. It was Sepang, where the crew chief finally changed the bike and he won.
So it shows that sometimes these teams can be a bit boneheaded, a bit stubborn, and maybe Digi's still on the grid for next year. If he's... Maybe not in that Ducati, because I still think, regardless of how good he's been this year, if Marquez came knocking trying to get that seat, he still gets it. But I think the whole sag of Mark going to Ducati started off by the fact that we kind of knew Digi was out of the job regardless of what he did, because his season was so kind of average up until maybe 4 or 5 rounds ago, he started to show a bit of speed. So the fact that maybe 2 or 3 maybe exactly. But the fact that it was that seat was like, where they're going, well, they're going to get rid of him. So it's like, that is a seat for Marquez, and it may be happen. And it's just kind of snowball from there. So if they did this 6 months ago, 12 months ago, Digi probably still has a ride on the Ducati next year, and Marquez is forced to ride a Honda for 2024. How could that change the season? That's a big change. But in fairness to Digi, he's tried so hard, and he's obviously given it everything in his time with Grassini, and I think he's very, very, very kind of deserving of this podium. And I think everyone in the paddock is probably delighted he's finally got one. And if he doesn't remain in the class in 2024, at least he got that podium before he goes off. I believe he'll probably end up in Superbikes. I don't think he'll go back to Moto 2. But even that now, Superbikes is getting pretty crowded, so you never know. But I think at the moment he's probably just trying to hold on for a satellite Aprilia, as you mentioned yourself. So yeah, be good to see him getting it if Oliveira does jump to HRC. So it's been a musical chairs for quite a while now, so it's going to be interesting to see when we find out what the actual 2024 grid will look like.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we kind of thought it was set in stone, but it seems like there's still obviously a little bit of movement around. I think Zarco, who obviously we'll talk about in a second, has said that he's kind of ruled out of the Repsol Honda ride. Obviously, at one point it looked like Lecuona was odds-on favourite for it. Maybe that's still the case for a season, because that's why Zarco didn't want it, by the sounds of it, is that it was going to be a 1-year deal on the Repsol bike, and I don't think he really wanted that. I think he preferred the 2-year deal that he's got at LCR. So yeah, obviously there is that seat up for grabs. Sounds like they're after Oliveira. There's rumours they were after Vinales previously. So either way, that kind of changes things. Like if Vinales, which I don't think is ever going to happen, jumped ship to Repsol Honda, I guess they'd probably move Oliveira up into his spot, and that RNF seat still opens up. So it sounds like there's a good potential that RNF seat might open. And, you know, if you're looking for somebody else to have on the bike, Razlan does like having rookies. Remember the punt he took on Quartararo? I mean, maybe, again, that's what he'd like to do. Maybe he would pick someone out of Moto 2, potentially, for it. But then also Digi's a good option. So, yeah, he could still very well stay in the class, but I think he probably is likely that he'll end up in Superbike over Moto 2, definitely. I think there's probably some options for him to go over there, because there's still a few seats up for grabs. There's a factory Honda seat over there, for example, that's still up for grabs. Obviously, Rinaldi's still looking for a job and stuff. So there is a few potential. I think there might be a satellite Ducati or 2 up for grabs as well at the moment. So yeah, we think the Moto Corsa, I think, is still free. So maybe Digi could be within a shout of that one. But Johann Zarco, the Frenchman, not won a race since 2016 in the Moto 2 class. We've been saying, well, I suppose we've not been saying, but everyone was saying when he first joined MotoGP how impressive he was. Even that first race where he was leading by a good margin and fell off. He's battling pretty much all season with the factory Yamahas. He was up there constantly, almost won at the end of 2017 as well, just second place to Danny Pedrosa. So everyone thought, okay, he hasn't won in his first season, but his time will come. And his time will come. He'll win a race at some point. And it's taken all the way till 2023. people kind of, probably Zarco himself started to think it's never going to happen. He's had so many opportunities that have been there. And I think today, well, not today, but on Saturday, I don't think anyone really thought going into that one that Zarco's odds-on favourite for this one. Zarco's going to definitely win. And we've had races like that where that's been the case, where we think Zarco is going to be the favourite and he somehow makes a mistake, he crashes out of the lead or something, and it just hasn't come together for him, or he just has a bad start and gets stuck in the pack and comes through too late. We've seen these late race charges from Zarco up to second and third places plenty of times before, and it's just not quite been enough. But it's always how it is. It's a race where it doesn't look like Zarco's going to win. All of a sudden, Zarco wins it. It looked like Martin had got it sewed up about halfway through, and all of a sudden Zarco ends up coming home to win it. And it's so good for him. I'm glad that he's got a win, because I think most people are probably saying that if he jumps onto a satellite Honda, that's pretty much it. I mean, not that it looked likely on the Ducati either, but if he can't win on the Ducati, he's definitely not going to win on a Honda. But he's finally got that win, the victory duck. We finally got to see the backflip again. Great race from Zarco. I mean, he played it so well. It is kind of one of those Zarco-y races with the late race pace, and he just risked it on that last lap. Then he just sent it because he saw that opportunity to win the race, sent it up the inside of his teammate, did a fantastic last lap, didn't get mugged by Bagnaia, and to finally cross that line in first place must have felt like a weight off his shoulders.
Yeah, he could have been easily expected to sit behind Martin on that last lap and maybe just hold position to kind of leave a limping Martin home, just to get him back to the box with some extra points. But apparently he caught him, passed them all in one's kind of quick and slick movement. So I think he's out of the team. There was only one thing he had in his mind, and you get nailed on the head there exactly. It was just one of those typical Zarco races where he wasn't there to start. It wasn't that he was in P2 all race and then made the break with 5 to go, or he didn't. He was just slowly backed his way into the back of shot, and then he was he's after passing Pecco. Oh, maybe Zarco's on for the podium today, and it just all slowly.
He was most of the race, wasn't he? Really? So
realistically, yeah. Again, we talked about Pecco being very, very smart with his tire. Maybe that's exactly what Zarco did. In fact, he was sitting there because he looked like that. He was a lonely fifth, probably at best, and maybe if something happened in front, he could have picked up the pieces. But just maybe 6 laps ago, started to get into the heat of the action and started to pick a few people off, and then got to the last lap and he was second. And then you were kind of thinking, Zarco's going to win this because Martin is screwed. He's not winning anything. And then he makes the overtake. Pecco goes through and think, oh no, Pecco's going to take it off him. But he just had such a clean last lap. And coming out of the last corner, to be fair, it was unfortunate because the cameras were all focusing on Martin slipping and sliding, trying to keep Binder behind him, and you barely even see the Zarco coming across the line. But it was fabulous to see. Again, we got to see his backflip after so many years away. It was a long time coming, and again, in the end, he gets his win after being the most successful P2, most P2s in the championship and stuff like that without a race win. So he's kind of gone on a long time, and I think it was getting to him, and I think the recent times that the fact he has signed for Honda and he has kind of announced he's leaving Ducati, his form has gone downhill quite quickly. So I think it was been more and more likely coming towards the end of the season that he'd do it. But again, it was just one of those Zarco races where he slowly got himself on the scene when it happened, got to the right position, made some clinical moves when he needed, and then just that last lap he was in the position to do it, and he had a teammate who was really, really limping at home. So it was the kind of perfect storm for Zarco today, and finally he's broken the duck.
Yeah, finally. I'm sure in his rookie season, if you had told him that he doesn't win a race till 2023, he would have probably laughed at you.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have thought that was happening a long time ago. I think everyone would have done. Like I said, obviously, even jumping back to that first race, how impressive he was there. But just the way it went, and again, like I said, it just didn't seem like a race he was going to win with a few laps to go, but it ended up being his first ever win. So it's just Canet left now, I guess, for the win duck. Dixon got his. Zarco's got his.
Canet was second.
Onchu's got his. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there you go. It's got to come from at some point. Again, it'll be one of those races where it doesn't look like it's going to be him, and
yeah,
all of a sudden it is. But pretty much brings us to the end of this one. Much shorter than the last few episodes that we've done. We've been pretty much over the 2-hour mark the last few times, or very close to it at least. But of course, with a whole race missing, with the sprint being cancelled and Moto2 being red flagged, a lot less for us to talk about. So We hope you have enjoyed this installment of the Motogp Extra podcast. If you are watching on Dill's YouTube channel, if you could give the video a like or leave us a comment as well if you'd like to, that really helps us out. If you're listening on Spotify, if you could rate us 5 stars. Again, you could also leave a comment on here as well. We do see those now, so it is very, very appreciated if you do enjoy the podcast. But we'll see you in, is it next? Yeah, it's next week, isn't it? For the Thai GP, which should hopefully be another interesting one. Could very well be weather affected again. So we'll see you in the next episode.